Serenity Valley Stories introduces The Cabin in the Woods. I'd always loved hiking, the way it felt to be swallowed up by nature, leaving the noise and clutter of the city behind. There was something liberating about being on the trail, just me and the wilderness. That's why I found myself deep in the forest that morning, on a trail I hadn't tried before. It was supposed to be a day hike, nothing more. But the forest had other plans. It started innocently enough, with the trail gradually becoming less defined as I ventured deeper into the woods. The trees here were old, their gnarled branches weaving together like a natural canopy overhead, blocking out much of the sunlight. I lost track of time, mesmerized by the scenery, and before I knew it, the path had all but disappeared. I told myself I'd find my way back, but the more I walked, the more disoriented I became. By the time I admitted I was lost, the sun was already sinking low in the sky. Panic started to creep in, but I forced myself to stay calm. I still had time. I could still find my way back. I retraced my steps, or at least I tried to, but everything looked different in the dimming light. The trees seemed closer, the underbrush thicker, and the silence was oppressive, as if the forest itself was watching me. The air grew colder as the light faded, and soon, the reality of my situation settled in. I was alone, lost, and night was falling fast. My breath began to quicken, and I could feel the familiar squeeze of anxiety in my chest. I needed to find shelter, anywhere to wait out the night and start fresh in the morning. That's when I saw it, a faint outline through the trees, something that didn't belong in the wild, a structure of some kind. I pushed through the underbrush, my heart pounding with a mix of relief and dread. As I drew closer, I saw it was an old cabin, tucked away in the woods, forgotten by time. The wood was weathered and gray, the roof sagging in places, but it was shelter. I approached cautiously, my footsteps crunching on the dead leaves. The cabin was silent, as if it had been waiting for someone like me. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. I hesitated at the threshold, peering into the darkness inside. There was no sign of recent activity, no footprints, no smoke, no light. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The air was thick with the musty scent of damp wood and decay, mixed with something else, something faint and unpleasant that I couldn't quite place. The cabin was one room, sparsely furnished with a broken-down table, a few chairs, and a dusty old bed in the corner. A fireplace, long cold, dominated one wall, its chimney half collapsed. I closed the door behind me, the sound of it echoing in the silence. As I took in my surroundings, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding, that this place had been left alone for a reason. But the night was closing in, and I didn't have a choice. I set my pack down and tried to make myself comfortable, but the unease gnawed at me. The cabin was too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed in on you, making every creak of the wood seem like a whisper. I could feel the cold seeping through the walls, and I knew I needed to get a fire going if I wanted to stay warm. I gathered some old, dry wood from a pile in the corner and worked on getting a fire started in the fireplace. It took longer than I expected, but eventually, the flames caught, casting flickering shadows across the room. The warmth was a relief, but it did little to ease the tension in my chest. As I sat by the fire, I noticed something odd, a smell, faint at first, but growing stronger. It was the same smell I'd noticed earlier, but now it was more pronounced, like something rotten mixed with mold. It seemed to be coming from the far side of the room, near the bed. I got up, my heart thudding in my chest, and slowly approached the bed. The smell grew stronger with each step, a sickly, cloying odor that made my stomach churn. I held my breath and leaned closer. The bed was covered in a thick layer of dust, the mattress sagging with age. But as I lifted the tattered blanket, I saw it, a dark, dried stain on the mattress, and something else, something small and brittle hidden beneath the bed. My blood ran cold as I realized what it was, a bone, yellowed with age and half buried in the dust. And it wasn't alone. There were more, scattered around, some larger, some smaller, all of them unmistakably human. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What had happened here? Who had lived in this cabin? And why had they left? A sudden noise outside snapped me out of my thoughts, a rustling of leaves, followed by the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the cabin. My heart leapt into my throat. I hadn't seen anyone on my hike, not a soul, and I was miles from the nearest town. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside the door. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed, waiting. The door creaked, as if someone was leaning against it, testing it. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I backed away, my eyes locked on the door, the fire casting eerie shadows across the room. The door opened a crack, and I could see a sliver of darkness beyond it, but nothing more. I reached for the only weapon I had, a rusty old poker from the fireplace, and held it in front of me, my hands shaking. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, the door slowly swung open, revealing nothing. The darkness outside was impenetrable, and there was no sign of anyone or anything. But the smell, that terrible smell, flooded into the cabin, stronger than ever. I could feel something was wrong, terribly wrong. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I grabbed my pack and bolted out of the cabin, not bothering to close the door behind me. I ran blindly into the woods, my heart pounding in my ears, the cold night air biting at my face. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out, until I was sure I was far away from that cursed cabin. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the forest, the faint glow of the morning sun just starting to break through the trees. I never looked back. I didn't want to know what was behind me, what had been waiting in that cabin. All I knew was that I had escaped. But as I finally found my way back to the trail and stumbled toward my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching me from the shadows, waiting for the next lost soul to wander into its domain. And I knew, deep down, that the forest had let me go this time. But it wouldn't always be so merciful. Thank you for listening to Serenity Valley Stories, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.